Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today, we're talking about jobs, as some may call it just over broke, or even the golden handcuffs. Today's guest did the thing, and by the thing, I mean quit. He quit his job a few months ago and is now taking an adult gap year. Welcome, Roger.
Raven, thank you so much for allowing me to be here in front of your audience, and I'm excited to talk about this topic. Of course, it's fresh and vivid in my psyche, so I'm glad to talk about it.
I'm excited to have you. I think it's super timely with all that's going on right now, especially these terms we hear, the big quit, the great resignation, just
Yeah,
everyone taking some time to really figure out what actually matters in life and what's important to them.
that's right.
So tell us, how does one decide to take an adult gap year? Because you don't hear
Well,
that phrase as
no,
much.
no, and don't necessarily know if my path is probably something people would want to repeat, but there's lots of ways to get there, I'm sure. But for me, we had been through quarantine for almost a year, and I had a heart attack in December of 2020, and coming out of both those experiences and just 30 years in the profession that I was in, I was just starting to really think about where I found my self-worth in life. And I really decided that I no longer wanted to be known for who and what I did to sell my labor. And so I went to all my social media accounts and changed my job portion to read, I'm the chief crosser off of my bucket list, and decided that from that point forward, if anybody asked me what I do, I would tell them I cross stuff off my bucket list. So that's kind of how it got started. The biggest one I had on there that I'd had on there for multiple years was to walk the Camino de Santiago, which is a 790-kilometer trek across north of Spain from Saint Jean Pied de Port, France, to Santiago de Compostela in Spain. And so I took that journey, and we can talk about that a little bit later. But I came home. It took me almost 32 days, I think. I came 35 days, and I came home. And 3 days later, a direct report of mine at my job told me that she was quitting. And it's not that it was a surprise to me, but through our conversations, she told me it's not like I'm going someplace else. It's not like I have something better. It's not like I'm totally dissatisfied with what I'm doing here. But I really need some time just for me and own my own labor and decide who I'm going to sell to and for what I'm going to sell for, and have a little bit more control of that. And she left the organization, and a couple weeks later, after going through that experience with her, and a really poignant experience I had when I came home was that I showed a reel that I made on Instagram to one of my fellow employees, who's a friend of mine, who had been friends for and worked together for almost 5 years. And I showed it to her, and it was just simple little slideshow of all the selfies I had taken with all the people that I met on my journey. And when she was done watching it, she looked at me and she said, I have never seen you that happy. She said, I've never seen you that happy. And in the moment, I'm like, oh, that's great. I was happy. But at the same time, I thought about it, I'm like, I don't ever want anybody to meet Roger, excuse the third person, but I never want anyone to meet Roger not in that state, not at the happiest point that he can be. And part of that unhappiness was I wasn't finding my self-worth in my job. And so a couple weeks later, I quit and decided that I was going to take an adult gap year. And so that's what I'm out here doing.
There's so many things you said that I want to unpack,
Sure,
like
sure.
all your labor, self-worth, and then
Hmm.
also too happiness.
Mm.
So I guess let's start with like, how do you define, because until I met you, I've never heard anyone like use the term sell your labor. But as
Oh,
soon as
great.
you said it,
I
I
can,
was
I can coin it. Can I coin that? Can I get money off of
like, like,
that?
let me see if I can get some trademark on this or
That's
something.
right. That's right.
Yeah, I've never heard that term before, but
Yeah,
as
and
soon as you said it, it made perfect sense. So,
yeah,
how did you like arrive to like using that term or figuring out
I'm
that's what it was?
I'm a very social person, and so
Mm.
when I meet people, and my dad taught me that skill when I was very young, watching him be a salesman, and not with just a swarmy like what can I get out of you attitude, but really trying to learn who people were and what they needed. And so I'd taken a lot of those skills that my dad taught me, and I put them to use in my own life. And so one of the questions that you typically almost always ask somebody when you meet them is, what do you do? What do you do? most times the response is, well, I work for X company and I do this, for them. And it really just struck me after those instances that I had that I didn't, I loved my job. I was blessed with several decades of work in youth development and teaching. And, for the most part, people are like, oh, that must be really fulfilling. And it's like, yeah, but at the same time, it's super draining, right? Whether you in any kind of public service, being a nurse, being a teacher, doctor, police officer. I mean, a lot of this, great resignation we're seeing is people out of those sectors. And I think it's not only because they're not paid what they deserve, which is true, but there's just this expectation, that you should be okay with whatever happens in your job because you get so much out of it. And that trade-off no longer seemed like it was fair to me. That I did enjoy my job. I loved working with teenagers. I'm thankful for the impact, whatever it has been in their lives, the ones that I've been able to meet and teach and love on. I love that, but I'm more than that, right? That's what I chose to do to sell my labor. And so to extrapolate that out a little bit, I thought about it. Everybody has 165 hours. That's what we got a week. We have 165 hours. If you're lucky enough to like sleep for 45, then you have like 120 hours. And after the 120 hours, if you sell 40 or 50, you got 70, 80 hours left in your life a week to do something with. And I think there's this big lie in corporations and institutions where they say, oh, we want you to have work-life balance. We want you to have work-life balance. And it's really a lie. They don't, because there's no way that 40 hours that I sell you is worth the 80 that I have left over. And what I found in myself was that I didn't have good work-life boundaries where I could say, okay, I've sold my hours. The contract that we entered into was for these amount of hours, and I gave you those amount of hours. Beyond those hours, those should be mine. I should be able to find self-worth in those hours. But because of the way, especially in the United States, that the systems work, is that if you're a nurse and you're working 60 hours or whatever it is, you're tired, you're drained, you've given everything you've got to save people's lives, to bring people into the world, whatever it is. And when you go home, you're tired. And what do you want to do when you're tired? You want to sleep. You don't want to do anything else. Your brain's continuously active about, what did I do wrong? What did I do right? What do I need to do tomorrow? All those kind of things eat into those 80 hours. And it's because we don't set boundaries between work and life. And so I stuck my sign in the sand and said, I'm not going past this point. And unfortunately, a lot of times in a job situation, if you do that, if you say, I have boundaries, you get penalized for it, and I just wanted to see if I'm using that terminology of selling your labor, if people can look at their job situation a little bit different, that you've sold 40. That's what the agreement was. Anything over that, I should be either compensated for or shouldn't exist.
Mm. As you were talking about work-life boundaries, it reminded me of when the pandemic first started, and I was in a particular job, and literally when I enforced my boundaries, I was
Mhm.
chastised. It's
Oh,
like, well, I
sure.
expect you to respond on Sunday evening or Saturday night, and it's
Mm,
like, at what
mm,
point am I allowed a break? It was almost like when I mentioned golden handcuffs
mhm.
at the beginning, but it's almost like, well, because I pay you, you're chained to this because you have
Right.
these benefits or because you're allowed PTO or vacation time. Then my expectation is that at midnight or on Saturday or Sunday or any type of, and I understand there are emergencies.
Sure,
However,
exactly.
at what point in time do we say anything that is not an emergency? And that's another
Right.
thing too. As someone who works in healthcare, the things that are emergencies,
Just about everything?
it's much more clear. That's all I will
Right.
say. Like there are
Good,
certain
good.
things like your, lack of planning, your lack of preparation. Well, it's not really an emergency.
No,
And so it definitely puts a lot into perspective, and also too about there not really being balanced, because when you
no,
enforce your boundaries or you say, hey, I'd like some balance, oh, and I feel like the environment in the workforce that we've created here, and especially like in America, that's what I can speak to, is
Sure.
that if you enforce any of that, as you said, you're penalized or you're
Yeah.
not promoted or even demoted or overlooked for different opportunities because it's like, oh, that person doesn't put in enough time or put in enough work. And one of the things you said, because I've been thinking about like the relationship between stress and health when you talked about having a heart attack. For
Mm-hmm.
you, what amount of do you think your not necessarily your work environment, but what amount of I guess lack of happiness, lack of fulfillment do you think that played a role into you having a heart attack, or do you think that at all?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna pretend that I didn't have family histories that of health that caused some of that. I also not gonna pretend that I've lived the most cleanest life that has prevented that from happening. But if I could say it's a third, it's a third, it's a third, I think that might be pretty fair. That a third of it is family history, a third of it is what I have or haven't done to take care of my body, and a third of it is just the stress imposed on life, and especially through the work environment is just huge. And it's crazy to think that anybody during the pandemic was stressed out by staying at home and getting up at 10 and going to meetings not wearing pants. And you think that, oh well, everybody, there was no stress. And probably if you were a manager you probably thought that, but it was stressful because then you have your dog you have to take care of. My partner and I were in the same small little tiny space trying to both have meetings at the same time. There was tons of stress going on during the pandemic. And as much as the place I worked for said, oh, we understand your conditions, we know this is stressful, and we want you to take this time to they still ask for deadlines. They still ask for more. And I think part of it is I don't want to totally blame the corporations or the institutions, because we've allowed it, right? We've allowed, as the workforce, we've allowed that to happen because for so long, to get ahead, like you said, we've done that extra thing, or we've put in that extra hour, or whatever it is, because we think we're going to get compensated or rewarded for it. And after 52 years of life or 51 years of life, I realized I never had been, never been rewarded, never been thanked, never exceeding your of what I sold you of 40 hours was the expectation. And I just decided that that was no longer the way I was going to live my life. And I'm hoping that a lot more people see that. I think that's what's happening in the Great Resignation. People are finally seeing their self-worth, seeing their hour that they sell, what it's actually worth or should be worth, and saying, no, I'm not going to do that anymore. Especially right now, there's so many opportunities to do things outside of traditional workforce, to make a living, that it's like if I can't get what I feel my worth is for my dollar for an hour, then I'm going to go someplace else. And secretly, I want everybody to do that, to find it, to say that no, I'm worth more than this. Billionaires and CEOs think that they're worth more and that their time's worth more. And so why does the average person have to sit back and say, well, mine's only worth X?
Mm,
If it's worth, if it's whatever it's worth to you, you decide that. And if you're not getting that in your job, quit and find someplace where you can, and whether that's working for yourself or working for somebody else. But that's the self-worth part. It's like I'm worth more than this. I'm that's not conceited. That's me saying I have value as a human and should be treated like a human, and my self-worth is important in that space.
I'm worth more than this. One of the things, as you're talking, I'm thinking about, and I don't want to say devil's advocate, never devil's advocate, but
Mhm.
for people that are thinking like, "Hey, I hear you, Roger. I completely agree with you, but my handcuffs in terms of, well, how do I pay the bills? How do I provide for
Mhm.
my family?" Talk
Yep.
to us about, and granted, this is, just this is your story and your
Sure.
experience, but how were you able to make that transition? Because quitting a job that has, your compensation, your benefits, all that type of thing,
Oh
and
yeah.
especially if you're considering like people that may have families, children.
Mhm.
There are a lot of, implications that come with that. So I'm just curious
Yes.
to know from like your experience, how did you navigate that? And what are your thoughts for someone who's like, I hear you,
Mhm.
I'm on board. However, I feel like handcuffed because I need the money right now. And how do I make that transition?
Yeah, I mean, I am certainly blessed, and I was able to decide for myself that I was going to raid my retirement funds to be able to go out and take this year. And I know that not everybody has that capability, nor do I think that everybody should go out and just quit their jobs. But it's for a process, and I did go through this, that I had to say, okay, what is it that I want to do? What do I like doing? And what skills do I need to go out and make that happen? So somebody asked me the other day, is this a career change? And I'm like, I don't know. I know I'm learning a lot of things that I didn't know before to make it happen. So like I have a podcast, and as you know, this is not easy stuff. Everybody thinks you just sit down, have a conversation, and throw it on the internet. It is way harder than that. It takes lots and lots of time. I'm telling you, folks, Raven spends hours upon hours outside of the hour that you listen to her each week to make this happen for you. And so so it takes that effort and that time to say, what is it do I want? I think that's the first thing. Say, what do I enjoy? What do I like? What do I into? What have I always not done that I wanted to do? And then just look at, what is it going to take for me to get there? What skill do I need to develop or learn? What certificate do I need to go out and get? What is that next thing? Now, the reality is that those things take time. Those things take money. I get that. But again, it goes back to those 165 hours. When you set that boundary, especially when you're setting it to own your own labor, then that 70 or 80 that you have should be in that space where you're working towards having that, let's just say, freedom from the cuffs, right? That you're working towards doing something, have a plan to, right? You can go back to what the whole idea of a gap year, very foreign to most Americans, that terminology, and especially when you add adult to it. And so a gap year, traditionally in European sense, is that students between primary school and university take a year off from schooling and go do something to find themselves. Get prepared to say, okay, I know I want to do X when I go off to university. So that doesn't take 4 or 5 years, it takes two and a half to get your bachelor's. And so if you know what that is that you want, whereas in the States, people say, just go and you'll figure it out, and it'll take years and years and years. They take that time off that year, and it's not sitting in the couch in the basement playing video games. Gap years are structured events where you say, I'm going to go do this internship. I'm going to go do this visit abroad program. I'm going to go be an exchange student. I'm going to go walk the Camino de Santiago. I met so many European kids that were walking the Camino last August. It was fantastic. But they take that time to figure out who they are and prepare themselves for that next step. And a lot of times, sometimes students will also take a gap year in between finishing university and going out in the workforce. And that could be getting an internship in the fields that they're interested in, getting multiple ones, and working for different companies and figuring out, hey, I like this company, I don't like that company. And so it's time to really say, okay, I'm going to research my career that I'm about to spend the next 25 plus years investing myself in, and saying, where is it that I want to go? For me as an adult, which really seems weird to take this, I'm not looking to find myself. I know who I am at 52. And although I have some things to work on, my podcast isn't perfect at all. I've uploaded raw, unedited footage to my service and had it go out on the air. But so I am learning, but it's more about, I kind of know who I am and what I want to do. And so I'm taking this year off from working in the normal context, to develop the skills that I need, so that at the end of this year I can say, no, I really want to do these things. If at the end of the year, as my partner well knows, she said, what happens after the end of the year? And I'm like, if I haven't developed the skills and the talent to be able to do these things that I want to do, then I go back to teaching. And I've got a teaching certificate. It's still good. And I can, and I can get a job pretty easily. And not everybody has a teaching certificate or a degree to fall back on, but you probably have years of experience doing whatever that job was. And hopefully during that time period that you've taken to kind of evaluate that and build on skills, you're a better candidate for jobs if you want to go back into the job market. You're more secure and confident about who you are to say, I can apply for that job. Half the time, I don't know it's half the time, but a lot of times I know for me, looking at jobs when I was in the position of searching for jobs, I wasn't sure if I was qualified for a job. And they say you have this many X amount of years of experience. Well, that's what they want. They don't always get it. And if you can show that you have these skills and you've developed things to help yourself better in those fields, that's a great thing to do. It's not like, is it a risk? Yep, no doubt. Had somebody go, I can't believe you took all that money out of your retirement fund. How much money? You know how much money you're going to lose? And I'm like, is there a risk? Yep. Does it make me happy? Yep. So I'm going to take it.
I love that. No risk, no reward.
That's for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely when you go out and do something different, or I guess for lack of a better word, unconventional.
Right.
It can be even uncomfortable, and also too, you have naysayers or people that are maybe even scared to make these type of jumps or leaps themselves, so they try
Projection.
to influence your decision.
Mhm.
One of the things that's coming to mind is throughout your experience so far, is there anything that surprised you or you felt like, oh, wow, I was not prepared for this?
Well, I mean, it's more of a process thing, but was not prepared for the bank that holds my retirement fund to tell me that I couldn't get it for 3 months because that was a certain kind of account that the organization I worked for had. So here I am thinking, okay, I'm gonna go, it's ready to go, and then they said, well, you have to wait 3 months before you take any money out. I'm like, I thought it was my money. I guess not. you know, and I think that's a statement on the system, right? I mean,
Mm.
we think our images on the internet are ours. They're not. You signed away the waivers to them. We think our money's ours, but the bank owns it and has it. We think we own a house. We don't because we have a mortgage. There's all these illusions of things that we think we have control over that we really don't. And that was a huge one for me. Just another reminder that I don't have as much control as I thought I did. So.
Hmm. However, though, you've been able to navigate that and figure that out.
Yeah, luckily, but it did put me back about 3 months from doing some of the things I wanted to do, and so yeah, and I had to, I gave up a really decent insurance plan, and thankfully, I live in the state of Washington. It's pretty liberal, and so my partner, I'm so sorry, I thought sorry about that.
No worries, no worries.
I'll go back. I'll go back to that if it's okay.
Sure.
Thankfully, I live in the state of Washington, and where it's pretty liberal. And so, my partner, who I live with, I'm not married to. It was very easy for me to get on her insurance plan, and it's a little bit more expensive than the one I was on, but I got insurance, and it's available to me. So I think it's the system. Then it's part of the system that says, well, you need me, right? You need this insurance, you need these paid days off, whatever it is you need my $7 an hour or whatever it is. And if everybody just kind of looks around and goes, wait a minute, I'm worth more than that, so there's probably someplace else that will see that. And if I take the time and energy to kind of figure out what that is, maybe that would be good for me and more and more healthier and make me more happy.
Speaking of happiness,
Hmm.
how did you or what have you done to discover like this is what makes me happy? Like was there a feeling you had? What clicked for you and you were like, huh, this is happy, this is not.
I think we all know that, like internally, like it depends, and whether you take it or not, or whether you go after it, is all those other things in your head that tell you not to. And I'll give you a pretty good example. This is before I started on my adult gap year, which I try to explain to people in the easiest way possible. Say, I'm only going to do things that make me happy this year. I'm not going to do things that don't make me happy, which still isn't a good enough explanation for most people. But I was walking along the Camino Santiago, and for those that don't know it, it's it's this long trek. And at the end of it, when you're done, you can get a certificate of completion. And so to get that certificate, you have to walk at least 100 kilometers or bicycle 200 kilometers, I think. But you have to do at least 100 kilometers on foot. So all along the way, there are these markers that tell you how many kilometers you are away from Santiago the whole time. So at 790 kilometers, there's a sign. At 450 kilometers, there's a sign. But the 100-kilometer marker is what I call the Instagram marker. Like if you're walking the Camino de Santiago and you come along that 100K marker, you're getting a selfie, right? So you're getting somebody to take your picture. And so I was on my way that day. My partner had joined me the last 5 days so she could get her certificate of completion. And so we started out that day, and we started out real late, like 9:30. And that may not sound real late in normal terms, but most days on the Camino, you're up and gone by 6 to 7 o'clock in the morning. So for us leaving the town we were in at 7:30, we were behind everybody else, which was totally fine. Didn't care. But that also got in my head that you're coming up to the 100K marker. What are you going to do? And just out of the blue, I'm like, I'm going to get naked. And so I want a naked selfie in front of the 100K marker. I'd never seen anybody else do it. I thought it would be funny. And, and I am so grateful I have a partner. When it came out of my mouth, she's like, okay, but it's not as much what she said, but I know in the past it would have been what was in my head that would have stopped me from doing that. It would have been her. It would have been me. It would have been me telling me, oh no, you can't post that on the internet because people will freak out, or you're going to lose followers on Instagram, or your boss is going to be mad at you, or whatever the case may be, to say you can't do that regardless of whether it's going to make you happy or not, you can't do it because X, Y, and Z. And I just fought back in my brain and said, nope, you're going to make me happy. I'm going to do it. Came out of my mouth. My partner said, yeah, sure, go for it. And so I did it. And I think that's it. It's not like this, I said, okay, I'm done, I'm going. It's like, it's a conscious decision every time. And it's not even just about big stuff like that. There have been moments in the past 4 or 5 months where I haven't felt good, or my brain's a little foggy, or I'm not in a good mood. And my partner's like, hey, let's go visit my family. And it's like, you know what? Probably not. I'm not at my best. And so it will not make me happy not being at my best going to your parents, or going to visit your mom, or being with your sisters and brothers. And that's really hard to say, right? That's really, because it's just so easy for her to get offended and be like, why don't you want to be at my family? Why do you want this? It's like, it's not about you, it's about me. And I'm not going to be happy. It's not that they don't make me happy. It's just right now I'm not doing well and I'm not happy. And so going and being miserable and a jerk isn't going to make me any more happy. So I should probably just stay. That would make me more happy to stay and work on my stuff and get my brain right and get my attitude right. And then next time I'll be there. That's hard, right? That's because
It is.
we always want to,
We're in our own heads, and we allow
oh,
other people to
yeah,
get in our heads, and you're like, oh, how will this
yeah.
be received? What will
Mm-hmm,
they think? I've even
mm-hmm.
had that where I'm like, something is in hindsight as simple as like, should I post this on social media?
Yeah.
And it's like, you have a couple hundred followers. What does it matter? But here in my head, well, I didn't like the way I looked, or what would someone
Mm-hmm.
think, or all those type of things. And I'm glad you brought that up too, about like what I heard also too is even more so protecting your happiness. And the term I've been using lately for
It's
myself is
awesome.
protecting my peace.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
There you go. Yep.
I was invited on a trip, and there's so many different like thoughts and dynamics, and it's just like, how will I feel about this trip?
Right.
There's different personalities, different things, and it's like, what, I really don't want to deal with that and
Yeah.
pay and spend my money. I don't want to spend my
That's right.
money.
That will
And
not make me happy.
like, exactly, I'm not going to be happy. And also
Mm-hmm.
too, during that time, it's like you're going to have to sit and almost like sulk to try to like get through it, or make yourself get through something. And I'm like, no, you don't. There's so many things in life that I have to do.
That's right.
Like, this is something where I just know that it's not the best use of my time, the best use of my
Yeah.
energy. And to your point, I'm gonna go there and be a jerk to everybody else because they're like, why are you so quiet? Why aren't you saying anything? And just it's not in the best space to deal
Right,
with this right
right,
now.
and I can imagine there's people listening to this going, "Dang, that's so freaking selfish," right? That's so selfish of you to want to always be happy, and it's just like, well, but then if I am, I'm better to you. I'm better to other
Mm,
people. I'm better to, it's the old adage that, you're on the plane and the mask comes down. You put yours on first before you try to help somebody else's, because if you don't put yours on, you can't help anybody else. And I think that that's so true in this case, especially with happiness, that it's not selfish to be happy. And our society has taught us, even through our jobs, right? I was a youth pastor forever and ever and ever. And it didn't matter what I wanted, it just mattered what everybody in the church wanted. Right. It didn't matter how that affected me, because I was serving, and the serving should make you happy. Like for you, the being in the medical field and helping people, that should make you happy. Well, sometimes it does. And a lot of times it does not. And so I don't think it, as long as you're not doing harm to others, in making those choices, direct harm, like you purposely trying to, I lost 100 followers on Instagram that day when I posted that naked selfie. You know what? I'm sorry that offended you, or whatever reason why you don't want to be my follower anymore. I didn't intend it for you, to make you unhappy. But it did make me happy. And I had a lot of people thought it was funny, and a lot of people made really great comments. And, I can't be, to me, if you're talking about handcuffs, I'm not going to be handcuffed to other people's emotions.
mm.
You own your own emotions, and you're responsible for them and the reaction that comes from them. And so I just want to be the happiest person I can be for the benefit of those around me. And sometimes that means I'm going to say no to stuff, because not because I'm happy because I said no. I know that it's not good for me or that other person, and the happiest outcome is that I say no.
And saying no oftentimes to other people is saying yes to you.
Exactly.
Saying yes to your peace, saying yes to your fulfillment, and also to choosing not to feel embarrassed about it, not to feel guilt about it.
Oh, yes.
If
Yes.
anything that I've learned like in the past couple of years is like, okay, you have to look out for you as well. And
Mhm.
I used to work at this job and I had a boss that used to always say, you can't pour from an empty cup. Put your mask on first. Like if
Yeah.
I am not the best me, I'm no good really to other people. So realizing like, hey, I need to look out for me to make sure that I'm good. I'm in a great space so that I can show up full, as you said, showing up happy. That
Right.
is so wild to me that someone else looked at your pictures and like, oh, that Roger. That's the guy. Wow. Or even probably like, who's that?
Yeah. What's going on in their life? What is it? And I've always tried to live my life that way, is that, um, Bob Moses, who was a member of SNCC and the civil rights movement and started the Algebra Project. I read a quote of his once, and he said, "Do what you know is right, and other people will see that and do what's right for them." And I was just like, oh, okay, let's go. I'm going to do what's right. You might think it's right for you, and that's fine, but I'm going to do what's right. And my hope is that other people see that example and they figure out what's right for them and they do what's right for them. And gosh, if we just all did that, how much of a happier place we would be, how much of a happier world we would be, how much better of a country we would be to one another. And I just feel like that's just so important. One of the ingredients of the things that we need to start stirring back into this pot, to make this whole thing go right.
I love that. That is an awesome way to end. Before I ask my final question, how
Mhm.
can our listeners and viewers find you online and your podcast?
Yeah, my podcast is called the Crossing It Off podcast, and basically it's a show. It's a weekly show. It comes out once a week. I have a new guest every week, and it's basically just talking to them about something, an individual item that they've crossed off their bucket list, and it's so much fun. It's very resourceful for you to see things that you might cross off your list. In the show notes, we have information for you to cross that exact item off, and then just other people just listening to it, be inspired to seeing what other people are making them happy and how they're living out their lives. So it's the Crossing Off podcast is available anywhere that you listen to podcasts, even Facebook mobile and YouTube. And then if you want to follow my journeys of my gap year and me crossing things off my list, you can go to Instagram at crosser.offer or Facebook crosser offer.
Crosser offer. Love it. And the final question is, what is the greatest lesson you've learned in your reset journey? And to be continued, huh?
Yeah, yeah, it's still going. My one of my big things, and I've been talking to a lot of people about, is intentional travel. Like if you're putting travel on your bucket list, how do you make it intentional instead of just like, oh, I'm going to go here, I'm going to go there, and cross those items off because I've been to this city or that city, done this thing. Well, what are you intentionally doing to immerse yourself around yourself? And I was thinking about the other day that I have this fear that people are like, oh, I've got to make, if it's going to be intentional, I need to make this list. And so I think that the biggest lesson I've learned, especially right now as I'm traveling through Europe, is that you have to intentionally be open for whatever the universe throws your way. And you know that my father just passed away last week, and I going back to the service and to the States, and I'm going to be coming back. But I did not bring a suit with me to do that. And although my partner could bring it from Seattle, I don't have a really good one, and I got it 30, 40 pounds ago. So I would like to have a nice suit. So I just opened up Google and picked the not the closest, but what seemed to be kind of almost out of the way kind of suit shop, and walked over to it and met this amazing young tailor named Fabrizio who's like, ooh, when do you need it by? And I'm like, next Thursday. And he's like, oh, I don't know. And literally pulled the suit off of the rack that absolutely, besides a couple of centimeters in the back to give me a little more room about on my belly, and tapering the pants fit perfectly. And it was just, that one of those serendipitous moments that had I planned everything out and brought my suit and done everything, I wouldn't have been able to experience that. This guy's kindness, having a really nice Italian suit is great too. But it's just being open, planning to be open, I think is the easiest way to say it.
I love that. And for everyone listening, that's definitely for me. One of the things is like to remove the being rigid.
Mm,
And when things happen, just okay, this has happened. It's not what I planned. It's unexpected, and just going with it.
yeah,
Okay,
I
everything is figure outable.
Yeah, I know I couldn't walk into Macy's back home and pull a suit off the rack and it'd be perfect like that was. And then, so it was just that moment of just like, wow, this is, the universe provides something we say on the Camino as you're walking, like the Camino provides whatever you kind of need. And if you allow yourself to be open like that, it can.
Love that. Thank you so much.
Oh, Raymond, thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed this conversation and I just wish you all the best.
Awesome. I'm worth more than this. What is it going to take? Do what you know is right, and other people will see that and do what's right for them. You all, this was wonderful. Make sure you share this with someone who's on their own reset journey. As always, my friends, remember a reset is always available to you.